Welcome to this week's edition of the Encore, where we go behind the message a little bit to the previous week's message, kind of expound upon it, peel the onion layer back a little bit, if you will. My name is Steve, and I am super excited to be here this morning with the very functional, highly functional, behind-the-scenes usually guy, Mr. Todd Deering. Todd, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good. It's, rainy forever here, but it's other than that, good.
Yeah, I was thinking about building an ark here in Michigan, you know.
It might happen. We might have to.
My goodness, it's crazy out there. I woke up this morning and it's raining again.
Yeah, again.
So I was thinking about it the other day, and, you know, the last time you were on a plane, my guess, is going to be when we went to Cuba.
Yep.
February of last year.
Yeah, the beginning of a change in the world that I don't think expected even then.
It was right before then.
Yeah.
We went to Cuba, did that little recon trip that kind of never happened because of the pandemic.
Yep.
Usually I'm flying all over the place. I did fly recently out west to Zion, but just before that, Cuba was the last plane I was on, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, over a year.
It was a great trip.
It was. Yeah.
So Todd is, man, I think you're one of the coolest cats in ministry, a highly functional person. Wow. I really respect the DIY attitude here. We'll talk about it in a second, but just so that people get to know you maybe a little bit more, man, you and Lisa found yourself at the Rock. How long ago?
Oh my goodness, yeah. So we got married in 2011, and we lived in Linden, and we were trying to find it because we were going out to my childhood church in Howell.
Okay.
And we had moved up here, bought a house, and we were like, we need to find a new church together close by. And we Googled who has a Saturday or a Sunday night service, because we had other things going on and this and that, and so we were like, we were looking for a Sunday night service, and the Rock was the one. Like, there wasn't a lot of other options, and it was close. We're like, let's go there. And we had already heard about the Rock Church through Trunk or Treat. We had come with the kids to Trunk or Treat, and so we came. We actually were Sunday nighters for back in the day when there was a Sunday night. It was a while ago.
Yeah, so you're talking back
2011, 12, yeah.
Yeah, okay. We're here for many years. I think grew. Yep. I mean, we talked over the years, grew tremendously spiritually, and felt certainly a different call and pull from the Lord. Yeah. And then spent a season away from the Rock. You were at the Village as an elder for a minute, yeah?
Yeah, John White and Jacqueline and Lisa and I, we took off and got the Village Church up and running out there in Byron, and man, that was an experience. The Lord grew me and Lisa, I think, and all of us so much during that time. It was a couple of years out there, and it's weird how God prepares you for things, because I knew like production stuff a little bit, but I was the only guy out there. Like, it was just me. Right. So I had to figure out a lot of stuff, how to run audio, how to run, a little bit of video stuff. And I learned a ton of stuff, and then also got the opportunity to preach there for my first time. And, be part of ministry, like from the inside. Mm-hmm. And so, that'll grow you. There's a lot of growing and learning, and, so that was a great experience. I mean, we had a wonderful time out there. So
yeah. And then found yourself back here a couple of years ago.
Yep.
And what a big move. So Todd's usually the guy behind the screens, running the production director here, and so on screen, you don't have a face for radio. I'll say that. So you look just as good on screen as you do behind screen. So and so you decided to come really full-time ministry in a sense, and in anybody's life, that's a tremendous undertaking. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the marriage ministry was kind of what led us back here too. We had started to serve in the marriage ministry, and there was some other things that was pulling us back to the Rock at the time. And so we got involved with the marriage ministry, and with Dustin and Haley and their whole crew. and then had a few opportunities to start teaching there a little bit. And God just kept pushing us in that direction. And then I don't know how or why I ended up in the production role here, really. I mean, it was just kind of like
what happened?
What happened here? But it was, I really tried to run away from it for a while because this job was vacant for months and months, and I knew it. And I was like, because I was self-employed, and so I was like, I don't need to do all that. I don't know, I'm okay with what I got. And I kept kind of turning away from it. And I think God just kept nudging and nudging and nudging and nudging. And finally I had to tip over. And I'm glad, because God has, it's been a wild ride, doing full-time ministry here.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. And, you've definitely a hole that needed to be filled here.
Yeah.
And you've done a great job with it so far.
Sometimes
taking things to the next level from a production standpoint, and some great experience, because maybe some of you guys don't know out there, but Todd is an absolute YouTube sensation. It's funny because years ago I was doing a lot of work, DIY work at my house, which I embrace doing, mostly because maybe I'm frugal, let's say. That's the word I'll use.
That's the word.
And I was looking at how to, do some drywall. And I just stumbled across, I didn't even know you had a channel at the time. And I stumbled across this video, and I was like, oh my gosh, that guy looks like Todd. And then I dig a little bit deeper. I was like, it is Todd. What's he doing showing people how to do drywall? You're doing something in your basement. And so, Todd has a YouTube channel out there, and I was looking at it the other day, and you have about 250,000 subscribers or something.
It's wild.
To this SSL Family Dad. I saw a video on there with like over 3 million views. I couldn't believe it.
It's crazy.
Talk a little bit about that. What is SSL Family Dad?
Oh man, this is a whole other story of just how God blew up our life. I'll keep it the short story, but basically, many years ago, Lisa and I were both working full time, running the rat race of life, and just stretched in every direction, not in the right directions. Lisa had lost her job. We were trying to live on one income, going from two. I started looking for all kinds of ways to just do things myself. We were growing our own food. We were doing all these things. And I started basically videotaping myself doing all these things. And then about a couple years later, I lost my job. And God had grown that into something that could care for us and allow us to do full-time ministry, allow us to share, we do scriptures and stuff like that on all the YouTube videos and talk about our faith a lot. And it just became a way for us to share our faith, but also provide for us financially so that we could do anything. Like we could just pick up and go and do ministry, which is what we want to do. And it's been wild, and God has blessed it, and it's really
something. You're all over the place on SSL Family Dad, whether it's showing somebody how to use a router to feed a pig or something.
Pig, yeah.
I mean, you're all over the place.
Or get attacked by a pig.
Yeah, or get attacked by a pig too. And that's what a crazy thing. So you're all over the place doing got a lot of balls in the air.
Yeah.
And then was tasked or given the opportunity to preach this message last weekend. I think you called it in Love As I Have, or As the Father Loves.
As I Have Loved You.
As I Have Loved You. Thank you. As I Have Loved You. Which is really the second half of John 15. So still in John 15, the first half of that book talking about, or that chapter talking about maybe the relationship between the disciples and Christ, and even Christ to the Father, where he's saying, hey, abide in my love, remain in me, and that type of thing. And then he flips it in verse 12 and starts talking about the relationship the disciples ought to have with each other, and given the new command, to love one another. And so we'll get into that in a second, but maybe can you just spend a minute, because you got a lot going on. SSL Family Dad, production director here, and you're not preaching every week. Guys like you and me, we don't preach every week. So we have it's kind of a different, it's a different thing. It's so spend a minute maybe talking about your protocol on how you would, and I say typically preach, but you don't typically preach, but when you do, it's not the first time you've done it. How is it? What's your, you knew the text that you'd be going into. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, but what's your play?
Yeah. And so, when Wes had asked me if I could preach, it was a little while ago. It was, over a month ago. And he, he said, if you'd like to continue in John where we're at, go ahead. Or if you have something else on your heart, go ahead with that. It doesn't matter. At first, I'm a little intimidated by being tied down to a certain section of scripture because you never know what you're going to have to get into. But once I found out it was, when Scott left off, it was a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh, that's it. I was going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, for me, it's a thing to prepare for something like this because it's my whole week. I still have other things going on, but my mind is all week, right. Just wrapped around this, and for more than a week, because I knew about 2 weeks. So, it's time in prayer. Sometimes it's time, a lot of times with my wife, we sit down, we'll read this together. We spend a lot of time, she has a lot of great things, the input that she'll give leads me down paths, and then we'll just keep reading through things. We do a lot of what I call reference hunting. So we'll go through with our reference Bible and we'll trace down, what's the references for this verse.
Okay.
And then sometimes that leads us down a trail and getting, fuller pictures of things and stuff. So, but it's a thing. It really consumes your
consuming
mental
is the word
energy for the week. It's a big burden, a great burden,
right?
But it's a responsibility. You don't want to just go up there and be like, hey, we're just gonna open the Bible today.
See where we
read some stuff,
and
see what happens.
Yeah.
So
no, it is consuming. I think is the and heavy is the right word. So that's great, and you do a great job with it. You have a great demeanor and very relational to the church and whatnot. So all right, so talking about this message a little bit, I think very fitting for you. And you mentioned your awesome wife Lisa. You guys leading the marriage ministry along with some other great couples, and so finding yourself in this text about real biblical love, I think is appropriate.
For sure.
And immediately as you went into the text, you mentioned that, hey, hold on a second, it's not the way it's not, hey, to love one another, which could go several different ways, but the very next sentence is, as I have loved you.
Yeah.
Which is, and you spent a lot of time on that, kicker. I thought, which was really great. So in your experience, or even as you approach this text, what are like misconceptions that the world or people generally have around that? Love is a pretty,
sure.
It's a small word, but there's a lot of hair that goes with that word. What would you say are some of the misconceptions that people bring with that word, and maybe how does that play out in relationships?
So we've done this before. It's funny because the marriage ministry, you talk about how to love one another a lot. That's the key in marriage, is loving, but not loving as the world loves, but loving as Christ loves. Because the world will tell you all kinds of things, the whole follow your heart and love is a feeling, and it's really kind of like when whatever makes you feel good, and then you should love that, and it gets very watered down and confusing when it's really something a lot more than that, especially in marriage. Because if you just love whenever you feel like it, if you just care for your wife or your husband whenever you think they deserve it, or whenever things are going well, that's you're not going to end up in a good place. You have to. It's a commitment. It's an action, and I think that's why the scripture that we landed in was so great, because we have to look to Jesus and what he did and how he showed love in order to truly try to mimic that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're not really doing it. We're not really. It's not real love we're showing to other people. I think about, we read this all the time, 1 Corinthians 13. What is love? It says love is patient and kind, does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing. We talk about that all the time in the marriage ministry, but rejoices with the truth.
What do you mean rejoice in wrongdoing?
Bringing up, someone else's failures.
Okay. So
mistakes.
Emphasizing or
and
kind of reveling in the fact that
right.
you missed
remember
this,
when you did this,
yeah.
and you didn't you missed the mark, and reminding other people of their failures or mistakes, and kind of, reveling in that a little bit. This is an easy one to do to our enemies, right?
Yes.
When someone has wronged you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're going to fail. I knew they were going to fail. Yeah. Look at that. That feels good that they, because you want to see them fail because they've hurt you in some way. And so, obviously you're not showing them love. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. And the beginning of verse 8 says love never ends. So this is 1 Corinthians 13. I read this almost every wedding, because this is the definition of love. Don't look it up in a dictionary, look it up here. And this is the kind of love that God has for us. I don't think we can ever perfectly have this. I think this is what we should strive for, but this is what Jesus did for us, and this is the example that he sets. Yeah,
and so the contrasted to what might maybe the world's perception of love, may be, where it's highly emotional or very, just kind of ebbs and flows. But when it's good, it's good, and you're happy. But it disappears when things go south, and things are going to go south. Right. Even in wonderful relationships, whether they're romantic or marital relationships, or just, friendly relationships, things are going to go south here and there. And, love comes and goes from the world. But, so I think it was, and even in Ephesians when, husbands love your wives.
As
it doesn't
Christ
stop there,
the
right? It's as Christ loved the church.
Yep.
And you talk about great in marriage, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you said from a relational standpoint, or even the body of Christ coming together, how do we love each other? And you talked a lot about meeting practical needs, and how can the love of Christ abide in somebody if they see somebody in need, they have the world's goods, and don't share them? How can the love of Christ, and you shared a story about people coming to your need, and then in the men's ministry we'll do this sometimes, and there was a guy right when we closed up for the season, and we just had a team of people go out to his place and just crush the place and get some kind of projects done that needed to get done for a long time. And I think that was a hands and feet kind of demonstrating the love of Christ for each other. And I was with you, man, on that in that portion of the sermon.
Yep.
And then you pulled like a Barry Sanders move, you just, I'm standing there, and all of a sudden you're you did a 180 spin, and you're down, down over here where you're saying, and you went, well, who's this love for? Because we're talking about, you mentioned the story about you and the people coming to your need, and us, rallying around the body. We had a all people outdoor service here where we put together kind of needs and resources and tried to do that. Mm-hmm. But again, as you're running down the field and I'm standing there like, where'd he go? You're saying, who's this love for? And you said, what did you say?
Well, I think so just to step back, I think the verses, he is in context, he's talking to his disciples, right, and he's talking about how they should love one another. But as I started to zoom out and look at some other things, he tells us, he says this not only to them to love each other, but he also says to love the world. And then Paul goes in and shows or tells people in all the churches how to act this out. Jesus talks about how to love one another so many times throughout the Gospels. But so your question was, why did I?
Yeah, what took you there? Because you talked about hey, it's for Romans 5, 6 through 8, you were talking about, hey, as you know, he died for the ungodly, and you're saying we're supposed to demonstrate this love for our enemies. And I was just really like, whoa. And so John 15 didn't necessarily take you there, but in your mind, did a light go off or something to bring to make sure that you mentioned that?
I mean, so I went back. Really, what took me there was John 13, where I guess it's probably been a couple months now since we were here in John 13, but he talks about in verse 34, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you, you also love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. And I started thinking about that, God has called us to care for each other. Like, certainly we, within the church, we should be looking for each other's needs. We should be sharing things with each other. We should be caring for people. Absolutely, God has called us to do that. But how much, I don't want to say more powerful, but that also means, there are so many people out there in need that aren't in the church that need Christ's love. And for the whole purpose of bringing them to know the Lord, that is equally important, if not more important, in my mind, to outreach into someone's life that, doesn't understand why you're doing something like this for them. And I don't owe you anything. I don't deserve this. I've been mean to you. Why are you coming into my life and doing something, something kind to me? There's something different about you. That is so powerful as an evangelical tool, and also just to do it, even if, not expecting that, I don't want to say anything in return, but
you said it, like, you give without expecting anything in return, which is really, really hard.
It's another one.
But that love your enemies, really, I think it's easy. We can reciprocate all day long. And I look at thank you cards bouncing back and forth. My wife, some of her lady friends, oh, thank you, for doing this thing, and it was so wonderful. Oh, and they send a card. Oh, thank you for the thank you card. It's so great, and it goes, what a beautiful card that was, and it goes back and forth, and it's easy to reciprocate love that gets poured on us, but we hold that sometimes, and we don't. I thought of the unmerciful servant, or the parable of the unmerciful servant, the guy who was forgiven much,
and the one who withheld the debt to his buddy.
And I thought I had the picture of that guy in my mind when you were talking about that that portion of the message. And so what kind of things do we have to overcome to actually live that out?
I mean, the hardest one, I guess we could talk about this for forever. There's so many things. It is so easy to love and care for your friends. The ones that you owe favors to, the ones that owe favors to you, the ones that would just drop anything and come and help you. Last night, a friend of mine had some trees down, storm came through, and I found out that, he needed some help. It is so easy for me to just drop what I'm doing and go help him. Like, it honestly, I know he would do the same thing for me. He has in the past. Like, that there's no real heart sacrifice there for me to go and help him. Like, it was almost natural. Easy. Yeah. Like, great opportunity to go hang out with my friend, help him out at his house. Totally easy. Now, what about the guy that, that I'm not friends with, that wouldn't do that for me, that I know wouldn't do that for me,
or has even wronged you in a sense,
is wronged me, or doesn't like me, or whatever. Like you? I mean, no, of course nobody. I mean, there's no one out
drawing
there
a picture
like that.
I get it.
But yeah, I mean, think about that person, because everybody has that person in their life. Not just one, but we have many of those people in our life that we don't get along with. The neighbor down the street, the friend at work, whatever. Now, it's a lot harder to go help that person when they're in need, because again, we're almost rivaling in their, when something happens in their life, you're like, well, they deserved it, because they were mean to me. Of course they deserved it. Are they not one of God's children too? Or if they're not, do we not want to bring them in? Do we not want to share Jesus with them? Are we not called to love all people? So that to me is the hardest thing. That's really the challenge. And I fail at this. I fail at this all the time. Like there's no, we all have a sinful heart when it comes to stuff, and we have to allow God to really soften it.
Mm-hmm.
And because we have pride, because I don't know, we're just
we have to swallow a lot, I think, too. And you said it, pride,
yeah.
And then any sort of, essentially we're not. We'll take the love from Christ all day long,
for sure.
But to hand it out to our enemies, because essentially, we were enemies of God.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, at just the right time, He died for the ungodly, and it helps. The thought it helps. I can forgive because I've been forgiven.
Yep.
I can love because once being an enemy of God, He demonstrated His love for me. And so I think it takes a lot to really process that and practically do that for our enemies. And it does speak volumes when we actually aren't saying the words, but loving in action. It's that James faith and works type of thing. So yeah, man, that was a really good, we'll say, insert, I think, from to share with the church is, again, easy to love those who love you, but loving your enemies, that's the real work, and a real humility in a sense. And then maybe the last thing here, Todd, we you talked about the greatest demonstration of love is to actually lay down one's life. And even so, the Lord did that for, Jesus did that for, at the time, His enemies.
Yeah.
And even on the cross, He said, "Hey, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And can you imagine, right? So He's saying these things, and you use that Saving Private Ryan reference, and I was going to lose it, man, because I'm going to lose it right now. When old Matt Damon is standing there at the grave, and he looks over at his wife, and he says, "Tell me I'm a good man."
Yeah.
Remembering the price and the cost of what happened for him to live his life, and that should charge us to be better people, because we're that guy.
We're that guy.
We're Barabbas in a sense. Where it should have some lasting effect. Like, man, somebody paid a great cost for me to be here. And he looks at me and he says, "Tell me I'm a good man." I'm gonna lose it right now.
Yeah, I know. I know.
So. Yeah, and that is an ultimate demonstration of love, to give up one's life, and in the military, like you said, you're the hero, and for Christ, and for people on the front lines, police officers, and these type of things, they pay the ultimate price. They say, and as husbands are to love their wives like Christ loved the church, or we're to love. That's the real demonstration. We literally can't do that. We can, but we can only do it once, like you said. You can only do it once. So how do you love like that without literally giving up your physical life?
So I think, we talk about this as the sacrificial love. We might not be giving up our life, but maybe we are giving up a lifelong hope or dream or desire, or, I don't know what it is, but we lay down our life for, as husbands, we're supposed to do that for our wives. And so that means sometimes laying down and sacrificing our wants, needs, and desires for our wives, putting hers before our own. There's a sacrifice of some kind anytime you go out of your way to show love to somebody. Especially an enemy, especially somebody who's wronged and hurt you. There is a sacrifice that takes place. You have to lay something down. And so that's the only way I can look at it. And it all seems so little compared to like laying down your life. And it is.
But they are little chunks.
But there are.
If you're setting us, okay, so husbands, love your wives as God loved the church, and gave Himself up for her. I think we would take a bullet for
sure,
our wives or our loved ones, if necessary. But would we give up our golf game.
Right.
Or
sometimes
give up our season tickets.
Yeah.
Or, whatever the case may be, that's kind of what so we're giving up little chunks of ourselves.
Little bits. Yep.
Yeah, maybe just putting ourselves not on the second and third and fourth rung of the priority list, and those and looking at other people's needs before our own, even our enemies.
Yeah, even our enemies. I know.
My goodness. Well, man, what a great message this past week. What a great reminder of biblical love and love in action instead of words. Did you leave anything out that you wanted to on the editing floor?
Well, I mean, I don't. There's a lot we could talk about. If I actually was originally going to do 12 verses 12 all the way through 17.
Yeah.
And there's too much.
We'll leave that for Pastor Wes.
I told Wes so you can have those ones.
All right.
So it'll be something.
Well, it was great to be here with you this morning, and great to sit under your preaching this past weekend, Todd. I think the Lord worked through you and sent a great message to the church through John 15. So thanks for your humility and service and doing that for everybody. And thanks for spending the time here this morning. So, but hey, guys, don't take our word for it. Be in His this week, and we'll see you next time on the Encore.